Friends, welcome back to the Northbrook Next Gen podcast. And today I am super excited. We have Dr. Stephen Argue with us. Stephen, thanks for being here.
Jon, it's so good to be with you. Thanks for having me on your amazing show in this amazing studio.
Yes,
yeah.
we are really blessed.
I've heard great things about this, and I'm really glad to hang out with you.
Awesome. Well, if you have not heard of Dr. Argue, he is a part of the Fuller Youth Institute and has spent years researching what actually helps kids and young adults develop a faith that lasts. And more importantly, helping parents and churches put that into practice.
Yeah.
Is that said well?
Nice.
He's contributed to major youth ministry and parenting conversations through books, articles, and research projects. I know that I have relied on his books and the work of Fuller Institute a lot in my 20 years working with teens and young adults. It's been very helpful to me. And you have a new book coming out, I just heard.
I do have a new book coming out. And Jon, thanks for your kind words. I really appreciate the work that you're doing, what this podcast is all about. You've been doing it for a while. And I think what I appreciate about you is I think youth ministry, people don't stick around a long time.
Yeah.
Or they get burned out, or they kind of get caught or bored in doing the same things. And I think you're one of this rare breed that keeps innovating themselves through being a youth pastor and now next gen pastor, and then doing the stuff I think resonating with parents is really, really great. And I think I resonate with that because I hope I'm a similar breed.
Yes, absolutely.
I used to be a youth pastor here at Elmbrook in the Milwaukee area, so one of the sister churches here of Northbrook.
Yeah.
And I think that probably people like you and me are sort of haunted by wanting to continue to advocate for young people.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really a lot of the expression of this new book that I have coming out. My research interest really moved from more adolescence into the 20s, and I would call that emerging adults.
Yeah.
And we've been doing a lot of research, graciously funded by Lilly Endowment over the last 5+ years to really explore the faith journeys of emerging adults. And what we've discovered is that what's interesting about emerging adulthood is that it's often the place where people in their 20s run out of gas in this way. The talents, the resources, the relationships, the habits that they had through their teenage years into their early 20s don't seem to work as well as they move into their 20s or their mid-20s. Mm-hmm. And they feel stuck.
Yeah.
Really not knowing where to go next. And it's not because they're bad people or that they're delaying adulthood or anything like that. It's like they really need help in a new sort of way. We define that as the place of transition. It's this place that what got me here can't get me there. And so emerging adults, I think, are looking for help in these particular spaces. So what we identified was 7 key transition spaces where emerging adults probably are thinking and giving most of their attention, and also looking for the most help. And I'm always about, and I think you are too, showing up where young people say they need us the most, right? Instead of blaming young people for where they're not or where we want them, let's show up where they need us the most. That sounds very much like the gospel and very much good news for them. So this is what this book is about. It's written directly to emerging adults. So I'm hoping people in their 20s will pick it up and find it really, really useful. And for adults and parents and leaders that are looking for a reliable source, hopefully this will be a book for that as well. So yes, I'm very, very excited. It'll be out in 2027.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it, but again, if you're not familiar with Dr. Argue's work, I think what I most appreciate about the work you do, the work Fuller does, is it is research-based.
Yeah.
That you do a lot of studies, and so it's not guesswork. It really is research based, and it turns into practical tools, which I love.
You nailed it. We say that we turn research into resources through relationships.
Yep.
And so what we try to do with research is ask the toughest questions that real live pastors and leaders ask, like you.
Right.
and then try to do that work by answering these questions and then turning that around to really resource you, because we have a unique sort of national, a little bit of a global presence where we're really doing this work and sort of seeing it from the 30,000 foot level. But in the end of the day, young people don't necessarily trust me. They trust you. They trust Taylor. They trust people that are in their lives every day, which is why we really honor pastors and we honor the work of the community, and we really believe in the church.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it shows in all of your books. Again,
Oh, thanks, man.
Love your books. So you mentioned this, but let's go back to, you mentioned how we as adults can sometimes just come up with simple answers for complex situations. So, for example,
Really?
we can say, yeah, we like to do that. So we can say, oh, young adults, they just don't want to grow up, for
Yeah,
example.
right.
And so what are some of the biggest misconceptions that parents and churches have about today's young adults? And, how does that shape how we engage with them?
Such a great question. And I have to remind myself of this all the time, but I try to remind leaders as well. I think what's unique about people in their 20s in particular is we tend to remember that decade almost more than our teenage years,
Yeah, okay.
right? I mean, these are significant moments that we all remember. But what I remind leaders is this, and parents to this, is just because you've lived through your 20s doesn't mean you understand people in their 20s today,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And that doesn't invalidate your and my experiences of going through our 20s. Those were our experiences.
Right.
But I think to answer your question, one of the challenges that adults have is we sort of superimpose our experiences on our kids or on people in their 20s. Sometimes that can be a bit derogatory, like, they don't want to grow up, they move back home, they're living in the basement, playing video games or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I actually think it just comes out of genuine concern and genuine fear that our kids in their 20s don't seem to be following the path that's familiar to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're taking longer to get through school. They haven't found that lifelong job. They don't seem like they're in a significant relationship. They're putting off having kids. And I think what we can do is freak out a little bit, like, well, what's wrong with them? And I think what the research would show is that it just takes longer to grow up today.
Yeah.
It used to be back a generation or two ago, you could get a high school diploma, go out and get a full-time job, get a pension, buy a house, start a family, and away you go. That's not the case anymore. Now, oftentimes you need more training, often in the form of college and sometimes in the form of grad school.
Yeah.
I was just talking with a school this last week, and I asked them, how many of your college students move on and think about grad school? And they said about 30%, which is a lot, right?
Yeah.
And there could be a lot of reasons for that, but I find that young people today are thinking a lot harder about, like, what do I have to do to prepare to enter into adulthood, right? The other thing that's interesting is that back generations ago, it was pretty clear what adulthood meant. It was often marked by these milestones like graduating or getting married or buying a home or having children. With those things being delayed, that's less of a marker for people in their 20s. And so they don't necessarily have the same milestones for defining what adulthood is. And so a lot of times people don't know how to tell them they're an adult or recognize them as an adult, and they don't necessarily think about adulthood in that way. So for them, adulthood oftentimes is being financially responsible or being able to make independent decisions.
Yeah.
So what's an interesting expression of this is that back in the day, if someone came home after, like, in their 20s, they went off and did something and came back and lived at home, that would be considered more of a parenting failure, at least in some cultures, not in all cultures, right?
Yep.
But we find that over 50% of those in their 20s will move back home in some time in that decade of life.
Interesting.
And it's not because it's a adulting fail. They actually are saying things like, well, I'm trying to save money so that I can buy a home or enter into a serious relationship or what comes with that, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost an adulting step, not an adulting failure. But it does raise a bunch of new questions. I mean, a lot of times I have parents say to me, okay, my kid's home again, like, what is that relationship?
Yeah.
Do I treat them like a like a parent, like when they were in high school, do we have to think about this differently? They've had a lot of independence. They're sort of bothering me, like they're kind of annoying me, right? So I do think that it adds new questions and new conversations about the relationship between parents and kids when they move home as well. So, I think that what we have to recognize is that emerging adults are trying to find their way.
Yeah.
It's more difficult. It takes longer to achieve adulthood status. And it can also be a little bit lonelier just because there's more options out there for them to consider. And so I think they need a different kind of support. And I think when we at least stop and try to understand their stories, I think it allows us to have empathy, first of all. And secondly, maybe we don't freak out quite as much that the standards we're putting on them are ones from my experience or an ideal experience that I had for them. And that's really, really hard because I think in the end of the day, we love the people that we know in their 20s, our kids, our grandkids, our friends, whatever it might be. And so I think that's just a way for us to just pause and think about that. So I feel like that reframing can really, really help.
Yeah. I kept thinking of empathy and grace as you were talking.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like that's as a leader or as a parent.
I love that. Empathy and grace. And maybe if I could add,
Yeah.
Those are probably the best ones, but if I could add one more, a third one would just be curiosity.
Yes.
I think that we have to recognize the fact that in any relationship that we enter into, there has to be this sense of curiosity. One of the problems we have, and this is more psychological, is that people can run into a problem of closeness bias. This is when I'm so familiar with somebody that I stop really seeking to understand them because I assume that I know them. So this can happen a lot of time in marriages, right? Like two people can be together for a long time and they think that they know each other, but they've stopped dating each other or understanding or appreciating each other or seeing each other as they're growing and changing.
Yeah.
And then the relationship can get quite fraught. And I think it can happen with parents and kids and as well, is that we can assume that, well, this is my kid, I know them, and make assumptions about where they're at now rather than trying to see them for who they are today.
Yeah.
Which is really, really important. I think about that as a professor. Every class that I offer, I have to say to myself, this class is not the class like the class before. They're a new class with new stories and new experiences that my job is to be curious about that, because when I'm curious about that, then I can extend true empathy and grace, as you've mentioned.
Yeah, that's good.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's really good. So one thing that I hear from parents, obviously parents have a lot of fears about their young adults, but one of the top ones, especially in a faith community such as the one I work in, is, young adults walking away from the faith, or at least appearing to walk away from the faith.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, from your research, what actually keeps young adults connected to faith long term?
Yeah.
And are there things that parents or the church is doing that's actually pushing them away?
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, but I'm on the hot seat. So, I turn this in a number of different ways. You were mentioning before, and I think there's another podcast about not having simple answers or the complexities that come with things. And so, obviously, this is a pretty complex question you're asking. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
But I think that underneath it all, we'll keep coming back to this, is that I think people care. I think people are concerned. I think people love those that are under their care. And so I think it always comes from a great place. So I'm going to turn this knowing full well that that's the assumption, because sometimes I think we can start pointing fingers and all that type of thing, and that's not very, very helpful. So let me start theologically.
Yeah.
The way I conceptualize faith is we have to remember that oftentimes when we talk about faith, we use it as a noun.
Mm-hmm.
I have faith. I share my faith. I can lose my faith, right? We talk about it in a lot of those ways. And I can understand sometimes when someone sees a younger person not sort of doing Jesus the way they did it when they were younger, them freaking out about that. And I think the impulse can be, they've lost their faith, right? And sometimes young people will say that, I'm just not doing God anymore. Church used to work for me. It doesn't anymore. And, we sort of freak out about that because I think especially as people like you and me that have been youth pastors, we're like, what did I just invest in? Like, didn't this matter? What's going on, right? As parents, we're like, I thought I raised them up. I can't believe that. And I think that as Christian parents, I think that's probably one of the most terrifying things that we have that we worry about. So I can really appreciate that. But the way I think about faith is less as a noun and more like a verb. I don't just have faith, faith.
Yeah.
It's morphing, changing, becoming, maturing.
Yeah.
And in order for that to happen, we have to go through this process of deconstructing and reconstructing our understanding of who God is, who we are, and who we are in relation to God and the world.
Yeah.
And so I think when I think about faith as a verb, it allows me to hold statements that young people bring to me, like, I don't believe in God anymore, or like, I'm not doing church anymore, or I don't believe that, right? Instead of me going, oh my gosh, no, because then the impulse is, no, remember the Bible, remember Jesus, remember you were saved, like, remember your baptism. Instead I go, oh, it totally makes sense. The concept that you have of a God that you believed in when you were younger isn't big enough to handle the more complex life that you are entering right now. Good for you.
Yeah.
You're not forcing Jesus into a situation. You're actually wanting this to work. And so what I tell leaders and parents a lot of times is that, especially as we move from teenage years into emerging adulthood, emerging adults want a faith that keeps up with their increasingly complex life.
Yeah.
And in our 20s, our lives get so complex,
Yeah.
right? All of a sudden, the world opens up to us. The assumptions that I had about things when I was 17 are different when they're 23. They just have to be, right? And sometimes I equate this to like math. Like, you have to learn the fundamentals of math, but then you move into trigonometry or algebra or whatever like higher level math might be. And you have to continue to grow in your capacity to understand that this topic is bigger than we can ever imagine.
Yeah.
And so I maybe what would be helpful for emerging adults who might be listening to this or parents who might be listening to this to hear is like, you haven't lost your faith if you ask questions or you're recalibrating the ways that you're thinking about your spiritual life. You actually are growing up.
Yeah.
And there's room in that space for conversation. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a couple things I'll say. Like, for an emerging adult, if you are deconstructing, good for you. However, you cannot live your life in the realm of deconstructing. Like, you can't live your life about what you don't believe. Like, eventually you have to sort of think about what you do believe, at least for now, and it could change as well. And so if you raise a good question, it's also your responsibility to answer it, right? Mm-hmm. And this is where John and the Northbrook pastor staff is really, really great, because they're like, we are so about faith as a verb and faithing. Come talk to us, right? So there's a little plug for you.
Thank you.
And if you're a parent, I think what you have to do is not freak out like, oh my gosh, my kid's becoming an atheist. You could say, no, they're actually trying to integrate their faith with their growing life. So this is, again, where grace and empathy and curiosity become really, really important, where we can maybe have the courage to enter into those conversations with them. Here's the crazy part, and I've done some research on this with my doctoral work, is when we doubt, there's a contagiousness to it. So, John, if you and I were hanging out and you're like, Steve, I don't think I believe about Jesus the same way. I'm not sure I'm buying it all. I'm actually rethinking some things. If you and I are in that conversation, there's a temptation for me to literally feel the dissonance that you're expressing, and it reminds me of the dissonance that perhaps I feel or have pushed down.
Yeah.
So what I will do is I will try to solve your problem so I don't feel anxious. Right?
Yes.
And I think that I'm speaking out from parent to parent out there, everybody. Like, I have oftentimes try to get my kids to do other things to make me feel better rather than to serve them well.
Yes.
And so being a parent is courageous, and it requires us, I think, in the faith community to be able to hold deconstruction and reconstruction, faith and doubt, all of that together, because that means as a community, we're working together to truly try to understand what Paul would say is the mystery of the gospel. I hope for the gospel that I never have it completely figured out. I hope it continues to surprise me, because the gospel is better news than I think it is. Right?
Yes.
Like it always is better news, right?
Yes.
And so, this is what I love about young people is I feel like they keep pushing me to think about it that way, and so I think that can be really, really helpful. Now, I've diverged from your question, so let me come back to a couple other things. There are a lot of narratives out there that aren't true that I want to just dispel right now. First of all, if you send your kid to college, they won't become an atheist. Like colleges are not the bastions of atheist building things, right? They will test and push thinking. That's what colleges are supposed to do. But what we find, at least if we look longitudinally, there are stats that will be like, well, young people, when they go off to college, they don't go to church as much. That is true. Since the 1950s, okay? So
Wow.
so that's just happening. And why? Well, oftentimes for a lot of young people, it's the first time that their parents haven't told them you have to go to church.
Sure.
So what is an 18-year-old in a dorm, let's say they go to a dorm, for the first Sunday at college, what are they going to do? They're
I'm
like,
sleeping in.
I'm sleeping in. Why? Because I'm going to exercise trying to be like an adult, right? So it's not a faith crisis at that moment. It's just them sort of figuring things out. So there are studies that would also suggest that actually kids that go to college actually attend church more than kids that aren't in college, right?
Interesting.
So, I think we have to just be careful that these narratives of college is this terrible place, trying to make everybody atheist probably isn't true. It doesn't mean that we don't have to be thoughtful in our thinking, and there aren't things that are going to come up, and you're going to have clashing of values. But that's just being a citizen. That's just what it means to live in our world and engage our neighbor and all that comes with that. So I think that's really really, really interesting. I would say one more thing, and this is for teenagers and for emerging adults, is that most teenagers and emerging adults experience doubt and faith crisis. But they think they're the only one, and they aren't apt to tell an adult or authority figure because they feel like they're letting you down.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything that you can do to encourage any question that is okay is really, really important. As my girls grew up, my girls are in their 20s now, but when my girls grew up, I would ask them this question. Tell me something you don't believe that you think I still believe.
Oh,
dang. Is
that's
that
a
great
dangerous question?
That's a dangerous question, right? Or tell me
Wow.
something you believe that you don't think I believe, right? You can flip that either way, right?
Yeah.
And then you hold your breath. That's
Yeah.
a daring question, but
It
I'll
is.
tell you something. It communicates something to your kids or your mentors or mentees or whatever. I'm not afraid of any question.
Yeah.
Nothing is off limits with me because the relationship is more important than our maybe diverging views on things. And I'm open to that conversation. And I think young people need to know that there are spaces for those conversations. Because I think deep down, young people are trying to make sense of their lives, and they're looking for places to actually work that out. And there's not a lot of safe places for that, quite frankly. They're judged for everything. They are wrought with perfectionism. And so any diverging from perfectionism is a lost cause for them. So if we can extend empathy and grace and curiosity, that seems to be the theme, I think that it can be really, really helpful to them.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question? I kind
Yeah.
of went a lot of ways on that.
No.
Do you want to come back on anything? How did that sit with you?
Yeah, no, I love that. One of our values at youth group is that youth group should be the safest place to ask questions. And I just agree. I think that, unfortunately, I think somehow the church, and maybe a lot of times we as parents, we think we don't even purposely convey this, but we convey this idea that you just got to believe what I tell you.
Yeah.
And we don't even mean to say it that way, but so our teenagers, our young adults have questions.
Yeah.
They are wrestling with it.
Yeah.
But do they feel like we are a safe place to wrestle with it?
I think that's a great point. And this is something that's really interesting. And I think sometimes youth groups can get into this problem, and as we as adults can do this as well, is that we say it's a safe place, but deep down the thought is exactly what you said. I want you to feel like you can ask questions, but then I'm actually going to tell you what you need to believe,
Yes.
right? And do you see what's happening there is I'm trying to control the narrative.
Yep.
So, a long time ago, I stopped telling volunteers hey, when you volunteer for youth ministry or college ministry, you can change a young person's life. Instead, I started saying to people, hey, if you like are in this, your life is going to be blown up and you're probably going to be changed. Are you ready for that?
Wow. Yeah.
Because if we truly mean the questions are safe, that means in a safe place, that means I'm opening to considering the question and changing myself.
Yeah.
And that's where, as a community, we grow together, and we wrestle with those things. And I think that's more than just a nice thought. I mean, the scriptures say that where 2 or 3 are gathered, that Jesus is present. Like, we are literally brushing with the holy when we engage young people as parents, as mentors, as youth pastors, whatever it might be. And I think if we are engaging and touching and brushing with the holy, we better be ready to be changed in that moment as much as thinking that we're doing the changing. And that's a letting go of control that I think sometimes is really, really, really hard. And again, I'm confessing. I'm not telling you all out there what to do. I am confessing that can be a really, really hard thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that true? What do you think about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but let's talk about that. So,
Okay.
So for parents and people working with young adults, teenagers, so
Yeah.
what's the line between trying to influence a young adult or a teenager, but also not coming across as controlling or pushing an agenda? Like, what does it look like? And especially for parents, as a teenager gets older,
Yeah.
influence changes, right? Like,
Totally.
You can no longer say because I said so, or you can, but it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really, really true. I mean, I'm always, as a researcher and as someone that's around people all the time, like you, John, again, I hope nobody freaks out about this, but like in restaurants, I swear I'm doing ethnography. Like, I'm just watching families and the way they interact.
Sure.
And I find it's really interesting that parents, especially in the United States, I think are so apt to give their kids choices at a young age. And I'm like, it's sort of in our narrative. Like, do you want this or do you want this? You know, and I think that there is something about faith where when their kids are young, we aren't like giving them options or like, do you want to believe this or do you want to believe this? We're literally trying to invite them into the narrative that we believe as a community and as a family. We want them to feel as though they're a part of the story that the community holds, that our family holds. And that's really, really important for a younger person to know that they are connected to this story, and it helps them understand their story. I mean, the community in many ways works as like a mirror. It reflects back to younger people, like, we see you. This is how we see you. This is what's important, and all that comes with that. So I really believe in that. I think as young people get older and they begin to ask and question things, I think that the impulse again is to control, and I think we have to come at that a different way. And I was just talking to some leaders about this last week. I think a couple of things have to happen. I think as young people get older, we have to do a better job of explaining what we're saying, or explaining our actions, or explaining our motives. We have to pull back the curtain a little bit and ask the why question behind the what answer. Because people in their teens and 20s are asking that a lot. Why? Well, why do we do it this way? Well, why did you choose that over that? Why does our church believe this and not that? Why do we support that and not that, right? And I think sometimes the impulse can be like, don't talk that way about the church, or like, Jesus, rather than like, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And you have a right to know, because what you're actually doing is you're constructing your own understanding of your own narrative that's connected to our community, but is something that you're owning for yourself. And so I think that the power of explanation becomes more and more important. And I think we can reverse that with as we talk with young people too, when they're like, I don't think that Jesus is the Son of God or whatever. Like, I'll just throw that out there. Instead of being like, oh yeah, because let's be honest. Like, adults are gonna win that street fight. Like, you know what I mean?
Yep.
But that's not what we want to do. I think instead we want to go, that is really interesting. So, like, how did you come to that conclusion? Like, what's informing that decision? Like, help me understand how you're getting there. And we do it in a really curious way. It's not to be like, all right, I'm going to show you that you're wrong. But what it helps us do is like, well, where are they getting their information from? Is it a friend? Is it the internet? Where is it? And I find a lot of times that the convictions that young people have that may be different than ours don't come out of this deep theological conviction. It's more out of like, they have a friend who has a different faith and they just want to be friends. And so they're finding a way to try to be generous toward them, right? Well, that's a different conversation, right?
Right.
So I think that trying to understand like the why behind the what becomes really, really important.
Yeah.
I think what else also we know from research, from our growing young research, we found is that faith transformation from parents to children, we know this even through longitudinal studies beyond our own, the conduit for that is actually relational warmth. Okay?
Yeah.
So you can teach the right things, but if your relationship is cold or distant or harsh, young people your kids don't really care what you have to say, and the connection won't be made. But if the relationship is warm and close and slow and attentive, they're more apt to see something in your belief system that they want to adopt for themselves. So the conduit oftentimes is this idea of warmth, and I think that becomes really, really important. Warmth, and I don't know, that sometimes people are like, well, what is warmth? I'm like, I don't know exactly. I mean, it would be how young people perceive it. But maybe I could say this. I think warmth is slow rather than fast.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems we have is in our world is we are moving at the speed of life where we don't have a lot of time for each other. And I find this as kids get older and parents are in the midst of their careers too, that conversations can boil down to task conversations.
Yeah.
Did you get your homework done? Are you going to be home? When do I have to pick you up? This is when is dinner. What time do we have to all leave in the morning, right? Those are the conversations. Are those conversations important? Absolutely. That's just doing life together. But I don't think they're warm conversations.
Yeah.
Those are just task conversations.
Yeah.
So what I like to tell parents, especially parents of like 16-year-olds that are like, they're thinking about like graduation is coming up pretty soon. Make time for the conversations beyond the task conversations, for the warm conversations, where you say to them, hey, I just want you to know I really love you. You know what I appreciate about you more than anything else? You know, when I think about you, this is what makes me smile. You know, I'll do anything for you, right? Like, you know, and I think that parents want to say that to their kids, but sometimes life gets moving fast, or it feels weird because, you know, it gets kind of awkward. You know, you're in the car, you know, you're like, how's school? You know, I really love you. Oh, mom, you know, whatever. But I think that young people are longing to hear those messages as they are beginning to move into a period in life where they feel much more alone and they realize that they have to take on more of their life for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that when those warm conversations happen, then I think when the tough conversations comes along, that's not the center of the relationship. The warmth is the center of the relationships. And then the disagreements or the challenges are a part of this bigger relationship that you have. Now, maybe some of you are listening to this as a young person or as an adult, and you're like, well, thanks a lot, Steve. I've already blown that. I already had task conversations. Like, we hate each other. We don't talk to each other that much. I don't know how to like recover from that. And here's what you need to hear. Like, it is never too early and it is never too late to repair your relationship with your kid. It doesn't take much. And as a matter of fact, as your kids get older, the research would suggest that there is a higher chance that you can actually have a better relationship with your kid.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you had a great relationship in the teenage years, it could get better. If it's been super rocky, it can get better. So I want you all to not throw in the towel. The relationship is worth it, and you know, I think that it can happen. Let me add one more thing to that, and I know I'm talking a lot, but
No, this is good.
I find that as my kids got older, and this is not research, this is just more anecdotal. Like I had to say I'm sorry so much more than I did when they were younger. I blew it. I overreacted. Nah, it was more about me than you, you know. And I don't make excuses for that, but I did remind my kids, like, hey, this is kind of new for me too. Like, I know it's new for you, it's new for me. Like, can we both just give each other like a little bit of grace that we're all trying to figure it out, and like, let's believe the best in each other, right? And I think when that begins to happen, perhaps that push and pull isn't quite as dramatic. If we make the relationship about the issue that's most wrought in our relationship, that is never going to go well.
Yeah.
If we can locate it in a constellation of bigger, more important things that we have in connection with each other, I find that relationships can handle that pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I've had to apologize more in the past few years than when my kids were little.
Totally.
It's very humbling as a parent, for sure.
It is totally humbling. I mean, that would just be a great thing. Like if you get together with the other parents, how many times you say you're sorry this week? Like that would actually be a really, really a great thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love your reminder that I think we're just so conditioned to everything happening fast. And, discipleship is, I like to tell our leaders, discipleship is a crock pot, not a microwave. Like we're not gonna, one talk, one moment is not what's needed. I mean, it can help, but what is needed is, and I love your word, a warm relationship over the long haul is what's needed.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk. So I work in a church, so I'm gonna give you a church question.
Church question.
So what role should the church play in all of this, and whether it's pastors or volunteer workers? And, is there anything that you've seen that churches are just doing really well, and vice versa? Is there anything that you think a lot of American churches are maybe missing when it comes to discipling and helping young adults?
Yeah. Great question. And it is, it's a really fair question because it's kind of the $1 million question.
Yeah.
So a lot of leaders will, like when they hear the work that I do, they'll say to me, okay, so where are all the young adults? And I'm like, okay, or they'll say, well, why aren't they here? And then usually it's followed up with a second question. They're like, okay, so how do we get them back?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
okay. Yeah. Now, what I think is interesting about those two questions is that the only people that it's moving in that relationship are the young adults, not the churches. So, I find that interesting. I'll let you figure that out.
Yeah.
But I find that actually there's a third question that comes after that. And this one is usually done in whispered tones to me. They'll say, so if they do come back, what are we supposed to do with them?
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And I find that a really interesting question. I think it's a really honest question because I think that if we look at a lot of churches in the United States, and not all churches, so I want to be careful on how I say this. They're sort of calibrated for life from child to teenager, then married, maybe career age, and then maybe grandparenting, and then it kind of starts over again, right? So the problem with that is, if you think about it, there seems to be a place for everyone but young adults.
Yeah.
And I think that without knowing it, churches can communicate to young adults, emerging adults, we don't know what to do with you, which goes back to the question that is asked me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that emerging adults, they say, I don't know how I fit here. Even the ones that grew up in the church, they knew where they fit in youth group.
Yep.
They knew where they fit in children's ministry. Yep. But if you're not married and you're sort of in between jobs, or you're working on a degree or whatever, emerging adults don't want to be just defined only by their marital status and be stuck in the singles group, right? And so I think it would be good for churches to sort of reimagine how we gather and categorize and label people. Again, nobody means anything by it, but I think that for the emerging adults that I talk with, they recognize the fact that that can be problematic for them. The other thing that they tell me is they're very worried about what they call the bait and switch. So I'll tell you a story. So I was doing a focus group with a bunch of emerging adults, and we were talking about like, what do you think of churches and, all that type of thing. And they're like, well, some churches are okay. But they said, then one of them said, yeah, but I hate it when they do the bait and switch. And everybody in the group, all these emerging adults, started like laughing and like, we were on a Zoom call, shaking their heads. They're like, bait and switch, And so I was in the call and I was trying to be cool. I realized later, like, oh, bait and switch. And then I was like, I don't know what they're talking about, So I was honest with them. I said, okay, so what? Let me just so I'm clear. Like, what do you mean by the bait and switch? And they said, oh, well, that's when churches say that we're welcome and that they care about our voice and what we're concerned about. But when we finally get connected with the church, what they really want from us is our horsepower.
Yeah,
they want us to volunteer.
Yes.
They want us to fill the gaps in children's ministry and youth ministry because we're young and we have time. And so we're seen as like basically fuel for the machine called the church that is going on. And they're like, we're all about volunteering, but like, I don't want to be seen that way. Like I have opinions. I have friends. I see pain in the world that I want to address, and I want to know, like, is this a place where I can have those conversations? And this is a great lament for them. I don't think that means that they want the church to just like change to their beck and call. That's not the point. But they at least want their voices to be heard. And this is really, really important. So some research would suggest this, that when we talk about belonging, like we all feel as human beings, we feel like we belong, not just when people tell us that we are welcome. We feel like we belong when we know that our voice matters in the community, that we're bringing about change, that our opinion matters, and that we are heard as much as we are welcome. Yeah. That's when I feel truly like I belong. And so I think that a lot of churches get the first part right. Yeah. It's on our websites, right? You're welcome. You're all welcome here, right? Like we always communicate that people are welcome, but that hearing each other's voices, whether it's young people or minority voices or whatever it might be, those become really, really important for us to really communicate to them that they belong here, that your story and my story both matter in this community, and that changes collectively our church story, right? So I think if I speak now with my pastor hat on, you and me, Jon, like, I think if we want young people, we have to be open to our story collectively changing if their stories truly matter, right? And I think if you communicate that to a young person, they will be all in on that, okay? Now, second thing, what I'm seeing a lot of is that churches that default to like major programming for emerging adults, there are some mega churches that have mega programming and a lot of, all these young people show up or whatever. And, I think it's really, really great. I think it fits a particular need. And I don't want to speak disparagingly of it, but I think that is a model that we're familiar with because it looks like youth group 2.0, right? Yes. And there's something about the collective gathering that's okay. I don't think it's necessarily wrong with that. But what I find is that what emerging adults really want is they are searching for a mentor. Okay. Someone that can walk alongside with them and help them process the questions and search for the answers that are really unique to their lives. Yeah. So here's an interesting problem. This gets back to something we were talking about earlier. So I was with a group of about 30 emerging adults, and we were talking about mentoring. And they were lamenting, like, I can't find a mentor. And so I pushed them because I want everybody to know, like, not only do I push adults, but I push emerging adults. I like both sides, depending who I'm talking with. But I pushed them, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I know you all want mentors. Why don't you ask for one? Like, maybe that's on you. Like, you're in your 20s. Like, why don't you do that? Like, I encourage you. I was nicer than that. I was like, I want to really encourage you to do that. And what's interesting is that they said, hey, yes, and we feel weird asking people to be mentors because the ones that we want to mentor us seem more busy than us, and we don't want to add one more thing to their plate. So that makes me think, okay, as an older person, what am I communicating to a younger generation where they feel like I'm so busy that I don't have time for them? Yeah. And that's on me to think about what's the message that I'm creating. Am I creating an opportunity for young people to be open to me doing that? So I think that maybe what as churches we can hear is that emerging adults want mentors. I actually think that they would be connected deeply with the church if they knew that there was people that were really interested in investing in their lives and helping them navigate their third decade of life. That would be amazing. And I think that, when we talk about mentoring, the other problem in churches is, as I'm discovering, is we don't really know what mentoring means. Like if, I'm like, John, I want you to, mentor this other guy, Sam, and you'd be like, great, I'm going to do it because that's what Jesus would do. And then we're like, I don't really know what to do in that moment. You would, but I mean, somebody else. And so what I think is interesting is that I think that the mentoring is spiritual mentoring, but I also think it has a lot to do with their calling in life.
Yeah.
So this is where a lot of times I think, well, maybe the job of pastors is to connect people in professions that are more mature in their journey with people in their 20s that are stepping into those professions. Mm-hmm. So why not get an older and a younger accountant together?
Yeah.
Why not get an older seasoned teacher and an elementary school teacher together? Why not get a grandmother together with a new mom? Like we have opportunities uniquely in the church because we are an intergenerational community. Yes. That's a rare thing in our culture, where we have so much resource to actually pass along the wisdom of the elders to a younger generation that's looking for it in particular ways. And that just gives me so much hope for the church, I think, is, I hear a lot of times from churches like, well, we're losing young people. I don't know where they are. Woe is us. I'm like, you're the church. You're the hope of the world. I mean, Jesus is the hope of the world, but we embody the presence of Jesus intergenerationally. Yes. And there's a collective wisdom. You have more resource than you realize. And I think the question you have to ask yourself, and this would be more like asset-based assessment, is to ask ourselves, well, who do we have here? Mm-hmm. What skill, what wisdom, what resource, what finances do we have here that we can actually pour into the next generation? And you have more than you think you do. And I think that that can be really, really helpful. And I think what emerging adults bring to these churches is they're not going to necessarily bring their money. They don't necessarily think they have a lot. But I do think they bring their vision and their creativity, and they are really asking the questions that their peers are asking. And I think we have to listen very, very closely to the questions and the perspectives that they have, because it keeps us aware of what it means for us to truly love our neighbors.
Yeah.
And because I think as we get older, we tend to insulate ourselves. The friends that we have, the communities that we're a part of are pretty established, and they tend to look a lot more like us just by definition. Age, economic status, race, ethnicity, that can happen too. We have an opportunity, I think, through young people to continue to invite them to push our imaginations of who our neighbor is and what good news is to them. And I think that that's a great gift that they bring.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes in the church, we unfortunately we tell people what we think they need without asking first. And so with young adults, we're like, oh, well, here's the program. This is what you need. And they're like, no, I need a mentor or whatever.
Yeah.
And so if I'm hearing you right, just listening to what young adults are needing in this season, and using the resources of the church with mentoring or whatever to come alongside them.
I think so. And there's a journey in that. And I talk about this in my book, that when we ask an emerging adult what they need, I think we also have to recognize the fact that they may not know what they need. Like, that is the work that they're doing to articulate. Like, well, where is the pressure point? What do I need right now? And to be open to giving them time to be able to voice that, because that's good for them. That's their agency, right? They're learning to own their lives in ways that they can do that. And it's good for us because it slows us down to, like you said, be quick to just prescribe an answer rather than allowing the emerging adult to get there, and then we show up at the right time, right? Yeah. So much of mentoring is not just content, it's also timing, I think, right? And that's I think the beauty of it. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're almost out of time. So,
okay.
Last question.
All right, here we go.
You've already given us a lot, of practical things, whether it is having compassion for young adults, trying to walk alongside them, not panicking.
Yeah.
But if you have any other last thoughts of advice for parents or church leaders that are working with young adults, like what's the last thing you would say, or what's one more thing you would say to help them as they try to influence the next generation?
Yeah. Thanks, John, for that. Well, let me just start by saying this. Thank you. Thank you for caring. Thank you for loving. Thank you for being concerned. I think that whether you're concerned or freaking out or interested or whatever it might be, I think it comes, I want to believe that it comes from a deep place of love and good intention. And I'm really, really grateful for that. I think that's the beauty of the church, that we care about the next generation. And so thank you. And thank you for that. The second thing I would say, I'll just reiterate, it's never too early and it's never too late to continue to nurture your relationship with a younger person in your life. I think that it's really easy, especially as a parent, to sort of give up. Mm-hmm. Like, I blew it, I guess that's it. It's never it. Like, there's always hope, there's always possibility, and I want to encourage you with that. And maybe the third thing I think I would just say is, remember that you and I need young people in our lives. We certainly need to be there for them, but I think that they can be there for us. Mm-hmm. They keep us wide-eyed. They keep us curious. They keep us hopeful. Yeah. Like, young people believe the craziest stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, I hope I never lose that ability to dream, right? Their stories matter, and I think if we can allow them to inspire us as much as we want to impact them, I think there's something quite mutual about that as well. So perhaps I'll leave it at that. Yeah. And I'm just grateful for you. I'm grateful for this chance to have this conversation, and I hope that this inspires more conversations too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time today and your thoughts. And I appreciate all of your research, all your work. I know it's been a help to me, and I'm sure countless other pastors and leaders. And so thank you for what you do. Appreciate you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Well, friends, that's our podcast today. If you are interested in any of Dr. Argue's resources or Fuller's resources, you can find them all online. But if you're having trouble, reach out to us. Be happy to connect you with any of the books. And of course, when the new book comes out, don't worry, we'll be talking about it. So looking forward to that. As always, feel free to reach out if you have questions or comments. You can find me on Northbrook's website, and would love to walk with you in whatever you're facing, whatever season you're going through. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again next month.